Okay, greeting Earthlings. Welcome to week 6. We're going to talk about your papers and your discussion posts in just a second, but this is the area where people start to get a headache. This square one of opposition. I'm going to break this down as quickly and as simply as I possibly can. Okay? Watch this. This will save you again a lot of time if you listen. Okay, so going to the next slide with the week 6 assignment. It's basically asking you to break down the components of square one of opposition. I want you to do that. I also want you to listen to this. Yes, go ahead and show me in the paper, in your own words, and with some of your own unique examples, that you understand IE, AO, okay? That you understand those components of square one of opposition. Great. Then I want you to go into how can you use these principles to change your own thinking? Has it changed your own thinking? Has it changed your own viewpoint on politics, religion, your private life, your professional life? Can you use this in some way for yourself? If you're simply regurgitating a definition of this to me, you're going to forget this a month from now, and who cares? How can you use this in your own life, or has it changed your thinking at all? Now, it says 2 to 3 pages. Some of you are counting the reference page and the introductory page as pages. If you write 3 or more actual pages of text, you're more likely to get an A. If you're writing 2 pages and then you have the reference page, and then of course I'm going to shortchange you a little bit in the grade, because some of you are writing 3 pages of text or more. And those of you who really go into more depth obviously get a higher grade, so just to let you know. 12-point font, double spaced. The 2 or 3 pages does not include your title page and reference page. It includes the actual text that you're writing about the subject matter. Okay, moving on. If you type in Google square of opposition fill notes whiteboard, right there at the top, there's a number of videos, particularly one that's animated, that breaks this down, but hopefully I can break this down for you. You don't have to watch those videos, but if you didn't like my explanation, there's a great deal of videos on Google that will explain it to you, but I'm going to do the best job I can right now. Okay, so 4 types of categorical propositions. Now I want you to think about the terms here. The terms can give you a headache, I understand. Universal affirmative, universal negative. Look, affirmative. Think about that word. It means in agreement, I agree. Star Trek, affirmative, sir. I agree, sir. Negative, a disagreement, on the opposite. No. Okay? Universal, pretty obvious. It means applies to everything. Particular. Ah, that probably means something more specific. It's not universal. Okay? So, just think about those things. So, universally, oranges have vitamin C. Okay? That's universal. If you get an orange that's, not rotten or whatever, you get a good orange, it has vitamin C. That's universal. It just does. That's in all oranges. That's universal. But particular pills have vitamin C. Not all pills have vitamin C. Some do, some don't. Okay? So, these are pretty obvious words if you think about it. So, let's move on. So, there are 4 types of relationships: contrary, subalternation, subcontrary, and contradiction. Again, Todd, you're giving me a headache, but just stay with me. It is actually very simple. So just think about contrary. So contrary is the relationship between 2 universals. It's either universally true or it's universally not true. Okay? It seems like there's a universal relationship there. Let me give you an example. So, rules in the contrary. For instance, all philosophers are deep thinkers. No philosophers are deep thinkers. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that that is true, that all philosophers are deep thinkers. Then if we believe that to be true, or we prove that that's somehow true, then no philosophers or deep thinkers must be false. Again, It's universal. It's concrete. It's black and white. Okay? Now, example 2. No pastors are corrupt. Okay? If we say all pastors are corrupt, then again, we're looking at, okay, is that false? Is that true or false? Take a look at that very carefully again. No pastors are corrupt. If we say that is false, it's not true that no pastors are corrupt, and then we say, well, all pastors are corrupt. Well, wait a second, that could be true or false. We know that it's false that no pastors are corrupt. It could be that all pastors are corrupt, or it could be that some pastors are corrupt. But if you notice with the contrary, it's using the words all, and it's using the words no. These are universal words. Okay? All, everyone, everybody, nobody. It's universal. And contrary is you have to look at if one statement is saying one thing and another statement is saying another thing, then one of these statements must be false. One of these statements must be false. Okay? And the other statement could be true, or it could be true or false. So again, we know that all philosophers are deep thinkers. No philosophers are deep thinkers, so one is true and one is false. The second example, one, if we assume to be false, then the other one could be true or false. I know, a little bit of a headache, but just think again, when it comes to contraries, it's universal. All, everybody, nobody, it's that kind of thing. And you're looking at statements that may or may be somewhat contrary to each other. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So, let's go to the sub-contrary. Okay? Now, notice the difference in the words. Okay? Some. It doesn't say all, doesn't say everybody, doesn't say nobody. It says some. Sub-contrary with an S. Some. A lot of statements with the sub-contrary starts with some. Okay? Some politicians are women. Some politicians are not women. Okay? Clearly, both of these statements are not contradictory to each other. I mean, they're both okay, that's fine. Some mangoes in the basket are not ripe. Some mangoes in the basket are ripe. Okay? So if one of the sub-contraries is false, then the other is true, or if one is true, the other is doubtful. All right, this means both cannot be both false, but one can be true. Okay? It can be true that some politicians are not women. Let's say that that is true. Let's say that some politicians are not women. Then it could be true that no politicians are women. Okay? It could be that they're all men. But it could also mean that some politicians are women. So when it comes to some, that's when it's like, okay, it could be that all men are politicians, because they said some politicians are not women. But once you say that some politicians are women, then that means if you say all politicians are men, then that's when you go back to the contrary and so forth. So that's where you see at the sub-contrary. Okay? If we say that some politicians are women, then all politicians are men must be false. If we say that some politicians are not women, it could be that all politicians are men. All right? So one of these statements, okay, they could either be both true, some politicians are women and some politicians are not women, but if we added another statement, all politicians are men, then we know that one of these statements is false. So again, they cannot be both false, but can be true. All right? I hope that makes sense. But if you look at it again, I think you understand the nature of what I'm saying. But the main thing about subcontrary, even if you start to get confused, it has to do with some. It has to do with a few. It has to do with not a universal. Okay, it's a particular. Okay, subalternation. Once again, we take a look at this. We have a universal affirmative with a particular. Okay, so this actually mixes the two of them. Take a look at the example. All jasmine flowers are white. Some jasmine flowers are white. Some students are brilliant. All students are brilliant. So now we're mixing them up. You know, the first one, it was all, everyone, or no, or nobody. The second one was some, or few. This one with subalternation, we're mixing them up. We're mixing the universal, all students are brilliant. All of them are brilliant. And then we're saying, oh, wait a minute, but there's a second statement. Some students are brilliant. Okay, so if we say, okay, all jasmine flowers are white, some jasmine flowers are white, then this could be both true. If we say, however, no teachers are lazy, and then we say some teachers are not lazy, okay, then that could be that one is false and the other one could be true or false. Okay, so if you take a look at the second one, the first one's pretty obvious, but let's look at the second one again. No teachers are lazy. None of them are. That's, again, a universal no. But it's just universally, it's like none of them. No teachers are lazy. Huh. Some teachers are not lazy. So when you put in the word some, okay, that statement could be true or false. Because you could be saying some teachers are not lazy. Okay, well, if we say that the first one is false, then the second one could be true or false. Because it could be that all teachers work hard. Right. So that's where the subalternation comes into play. Okay, but again, if you start to get confused, we're mixing the universal, all, everyone, or no or nobody, versus some. Okay? So the first example I gave you, completely universal. The second example, very, very specific. Some. This one mixes the both of them. All and some. Okay? That's for subalternation. Now, let's take a look at this, the rules in subalternation. I won't read this to you, but it could be that certain things are doubtful. So in other words, when you mix all and some, it could be that certain things are doubtful, and certain things could be true or false. This is the more kind of complex category of the square one of opposition. Okay. Contradiction. Once again, we're mixing them, but just in a different order. We start with the universal, then we go to the particular, affirmative to negative, negative to affirmative. What does that mean? All men are mortal. Some men are not mortal. No men are mortal. Some men are mortal. Okay? So you notice that there's a negative here in these examples, but again, it's mixing the universal with the specific. All men are mortal. Wait a minute, some men are not mortal. No men are mortal. Some men are mortal. So clearly, if you think about it before I even give you the answers to this, you know that one of these statements has to be false. Okay? If all men are mortal, and we say, well, some men are not mortal, if we agree that all men are mortal, then the second statement must be false. Pretty easy, right? Okay. So this is the graph of the square one of opposition. The subalternation seems to be the one that's the most tricky. So if you are getting confused by that, look at this video again, or look at the other videos that you can look at Google to explain it to you. I went through this once with you. I do find that when it comes to square one of opposition, it's kind of like those things, guys, that something just clicks in your brain. You look at it and you're confused and you don't get it and you don't get it. It's like, I just can't. It's almost kind of like trying to learn a movement in sports. You just can't get it. You can't get it. And then suddenly, oh, I feel it. I got it. So whether it's my video or another video that you can use on Google, look at this 2 or 3 times, you know, or another video until it clicks. You'll feel this, seriously, it's like you feel this click in your brain. Oh, I got it. You know, it seems difficult and like a headache at first, but then you understand it. Okay? So, what in the world does this have to do with me? Why do I need to learn this blankety blank? Okay? Well, let's take a look at some of these statements. All Republicans are better than Democrats. All Democrats are better than Republicans. Most Democrats are better than Republicans. Most Republicans are better than Democrats. Now, clearly, if you take a look at, now again, I don't care how you feel about this, but with the first 2 statements, I'm dealing with the what? The universal. All of them. They all must be better. Which a lot of people, believe it or not, even if they don't admit it to themselves, again, I've talked about this in other videos, most people, when it comes to politics and religion and different kinds of things, deep down inside, and we've proven this even with brain scan technology from Drew Weston, people feel this way. That if you are of a particular tribe or belief, you just tend to gravitate, whether you want to admit to yourself. You know, everybody I meet, oh, Todd, I'm kind of independent. I really look at both sides of the issue. And as I talk to them, I realize, you know, Democrats watch MSNBC and Republicans watch Fox News, and that's why we're very divided, and people don't want to admit to themselves that we are very, very divided and we can't see eye to eye on anything. And especially when it comes to political subjects, and we've talked about this before, such as abortion and gun control and things like this that we've already discussed in class. So, what does this have to do with you? It has to do with you becoming a critical thinker. Am I doing universal thinking? Am I putting a blanket statement over everything and everyone versus particulars? And I went to most, you could say some Democrats are better than Republicans, or some Republicans are better than Democrats. And then you have to get into, how do we measure a good politician? Most people, I'd say 99%, measure a politician by whether they have an R next to their name, Republican, or whether they have a D next to their name, Democrat. Once a person sees that R or that D, they're Republican, they're Democrat. I don't have to think about this anymore. I don't like thinking about politics. I actually had a friend once saying, Todd, I don't like to discuss politics. Okay. But at some point, some of you have children. We're going through a lot. And if you want to be political, fine. If you don't want to be political, fine. But I do hope that all of you want to be critical thinkers. And the reason I choose politics is because it affects healthcare, especially now, what's going on with COVID-19. So, how do we measure a good politician? How do we do it? Do we simply say, universal? I like all Republicans, or I like all Democrats. Or do you actually have some kind of critical thinking process to determine, maybe square one of opposition, to determine how you are going to vote? Do you look at whether a politician has increased employment, balanced the budget, increased health care, increased education? What do you care about? One of my friends said the only thing he cares about is getting people more guns. Okay. Kind of ironic because he doesn't own a gun, but that's what he said. But what is your measurement? What is your determination to do this? So for instance, and again, I am not saying whether I'm Republican or Democrat. I'm never going to do that because I want you to feel that you make that determination for yourself, not that I could influence you. But here's statistics from the budget department and the other commerce departments and the accountability office of the United States. So these are the presidents since we've been measuring these kinds of stats, starting with FDR. The first one is the amount of debt that went up. So it went up, or they were able to get a surplus. So if it's a positive number, that means our debt went way up. So starting with FDR, he clearly had an incredible increase in employment. We were going through the Great Depression, started in 1929. FDR becomes president. He was president elected 4 times and probably would have been elected a 5th time had he not passed away. But he did increase the debt a great deal. So what matters to a person more? Now, again, you may not care about employment and debt as much as other people, but I'm just giving you an example. So he did increase the debt, but employment went way up. I have met people who have said, I love FDR. He increased employment. He got social services, all these social programs, TVA, you name it. He saved the country. Other folks say, well, he opened up Pandora's box to increase the debt so much that we'll never get out of it. It depends on how you view it. But these statistics are irrefutable. They're just numbers. And I won't go through every single president, but it is interesting to me that you look at who actually balanced the budget. It's only been one person. Let me ask you, looking at this chart, who is it? It was Bill Clinton. Not that he didn't make mistakes. People say, well, Todd, he also got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act, which is what opened Pandora's box for all the banking corruption. Yes, he balanced the budget and employment went up, but so again, it's completely up to you how you measure a president. This is one way to begin how to measure a president. And what I find from this little chart here is that some Democrats increased employment. Some did not. Some Republicans increased employment, like Ronald Reagan. Some did not, like Richard Nixon. So, unfortunately, I find that this chart tells me, at least from these little statistics here, that using universals, we can do that with some things, such as oranges have vitamin C. But when it comes to politics, even though most people are universal thinkers, the truth is that some Democrats probably are successful, some are not. Some Republicans are probably successful, some are not. That's unfortunate, but the good news is if you have a kind of particular thinking that looks at particulars and not universals, you're going to make a more intelligent decision for yourself, for healthcare, for your children, for everyone involved, and who you vote for, and hopefully you do vote. And again, who you vote for, completely your business. How you think about politics, completely your business. I love it that a few years from now, students say, I feel like I think more. I feel like people can't lie to me as easily. I feel like that I'm making more informed decisions. I feel like I'm a little bit, dare I say it, smarter. It's great to memorize facts. That's great. I met I know a guy, he has 3 board certifications as a doctor. He's one of the only 200 people in the country that has this. And I said, you must be so brilliant. Oh my God. He said, I really am not. He said, I'm not. I said, oh, come on. He said, no, Todd, I just memorize. He said, I just sit down in the library 12, 13 hours a day, every day, and I memorize facts. He said, that's great. That's good. And it got me these board certifications, I guess, but he goes, anybody can do that if they just have the discipline. But he says, you know what, I get in trouble. He says, I make mistakes, and he's made relationship mistakes. I mean, he admits he's not the most, he just sits down and memorizes. And that's great. We all have to do that. And that's something you have to do for your profession, and I get that too. But this is not a class for that. This is a class about how we're going to actually create better critical thinking for yourselves. Now, let's go to the discussion post and tell you this very quickly. Most of you are doing a great job. Please, I've emailed a number of you about this. You have until tomorrow for this post as well. Number 1, please respond to at least 2 peers. A lot of you are putting an initial post, but you're not putting in a response to peers, which is required. Have at least one extra reference beyond the textbook for your initial post. And this is the number one thing. How can these principles help you? I just gave you an example of how these principles of square one of opposition helped me. I used to just vote one way when it comes to politics. Not going to tell you which way I voted. Not going to tell you how I changed in terms of who I voted recently, but I did change my thinking in terms of how I was able to vote because I look at politicians more particularly and more critically. That's how it helped me. Now, if you don't give a hoot about politics, you don't want to get into that, you've already made up your mind, that's fine. But surely to goodness, these principles can help you in some